Have you ever had the feeling that everything that happened in your life, every loss, every silence, every delay, was not by chance, but rather a preparation for something much greater? If this question resonates with you, it's no coincidence that this video has appeared to you now. It's as if the universe, or something even greater, has timed this moment for your answers to finally arrive. Maybe no one saw what you went through. Maybe they even doubted your strength. But I guarantee that every second of this journey had a purpose. And today, here, we will unlock that understanding together. But before we continue with this revelation, please hit the like button so this message reaches more people who need to hear it. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content that can transform your life from the inside out. And I want you to comment below with the number 77, because that's the number of the chosen ones. And if you're seeing this, I believe you're part of that group. Now, take a deep breath. Because what I'm going to show you next could change the way you see every struggle, every delay, and every silence you've ever experienced. There was a time when everyone around you believed the silence that enveloped you was the end. They heaped layers of contempt, lies, and indifference upon you, as if your story could be buried along with your hope. But what they didn't know is that seeds don't die in the dark. They prepare themselves. Every moment of isolation, every closed door, and every lack of applause was in fact a call for deep inner work. There was no rush. The earth that covered you wasn't a grave, it was a cradle. And silently you were growing, strengthening your roots to bear the weight of what would come next. While they judged you by what they saw on the surface, the invisible worked in your favor. Like bamboo that remains hidden for years before exploding upward, you were in a sacred process of preparation. It was your underground station, the one that couldn't be photographed or shared on social media, and it was precisely in this anonymity that your strength consolidated. They expected immediate signs of victory to believe in your worth, but you weren't interested in convincing anyone. You were too busy making yourself unbreakable, and then the day arrived. The ground that once held you down broke, and what grew was not just a timid twig, but an entire forest. The impact was so great that even those who tried to bury you were left speechless. What was a sentence for them was a training ground for you. And in that moment it became clear. It wasn't the world that decided when you would blossom. It was your own roots. If this message touches your heart and you feel it's meant for you, then I want to propose something special. Here on YouTube, there's a button called Thanks, and through it you can send an amount as a way of showing gratitude. Today, I want you to send 100, not as a payment, but as a gesture of faith and connection with what's to come. I believe that when we plant gratitude in the present, the universe prepares extraordinary harvests in the future. And this gesture today is symbolic. It represents your preparation to receive so much more. One day, this seed may even grow into something grand, like the key to the house you dream of. I'm not just talking about walls and a roof, but a home, a space where your peace and your story can flourish. So if you feel in your spirit that this message is yours, click Thanks below, send the $100, and write your message of gratitude along with it. This is your moment to say to the universe, I am ready, I receive, and I am grateful. While many clamored to be seen, you chose the path of silence, not because you had nothing to say, but because you knew that true power doesn't need noise to exist. It was an invisible construction, made of late nights, painful reflections, and strategic decisions. While the world sought distractions, you found yourself in the spotlight, and little by little, you began to build something no one could tear down, an inner empire, solid and impenetrable. Silence was your strength, and at the same time, your weapon. While they tried to measure your progress by what they saw, you accumulated victories known only to you. Every unanswered criticism, every ignored provocation, and every avoided conversation were invisible bricks in this construction. They mistook your calm for giving up, but they were wrong. What you called patience, they called weakness, and it was this misinterpretation that gave you the freedom to act without interruption. When the right moment arrived, there was no announcement or warning. You were simply there, whole, ready, immense. Those who spent years trying to decipher you finally understood that your power lay in what you didn't say. And by the time they realized this, it was too late to achieve what you had built. Your empire was established, and no external force could topple it, because it didn't depend on the world to exist. It was born of you. From the beginning, there was a hidden plan, to wait for you to break. They watched every step, every hesitation, every mistake, hoping to see the exact moment when the pressure would become unbearable. They surrounded you with obstacles, waiting for fatigue to take over. But what they didn't foresee was that you wouldn't just survive the fire, you would reinvent yourself in it. The ashes they left for you became the raw material for your reconstruction. There was no spectacle, no revenge speech, just silent work. While they celebrated your supposed failure, you gathered each broken piece and transformed it into something greater than before. And it was on this journey that you discovered you didn't need to prove anything to anyone. You just needed to prove to yourself that you were capable. Your focus shifted from defeating others to overcoming yourself. When you resurfaced, it wasn't with the same face as before. Your posture, your energy, and your gaze carried the authority of someone who had hit rock bottom and built steps to climb out. They expected a survivor scarred by trauma. They found a king, crowned not by gold, but by experience. And that crown no one could take. Some victories make a splash, and others merely shine. Yours was the latter. While others collect trophies to show off, your greatest reward was looking around and realizing you no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. Victory lay in the silence of quiet mornings, in the weight lifted from your shoulders, in the peace no one could buy. There were no grandiose posts or public declarations, just the intimate realization that you had won, not by crushing others, but by overcoming yourself. Your critics had to watch, uninvited, your rise. And that's how your victory became even more powerful. It wasn't announced, it was perceived. Deep down, you understood that shouting about your achievement is for those still seeking recognition. You already had what mattered: freedom, clarity, and purpose. And in the silence of that achievement lay your true strength. The provocation was in every gesture, in every veiled word. They wanted you to react, to show anger, to lose control, but you chose another path, not for lack of courage, but for an excess of wisdom. You realized that fighting on their side would mean losing the most important battle, the battle to preserve who you are. You maintained your dignity when pride demanded revenge. You chose class when the temptation was to respond in kind. And in the process, you discovered that true power lies not in winning any dispute, but in choosing the right battles. You didn't become a reflection of the offenses. You chose to be the mirror of everything they would never be. In the end, your peace became the harshest sentence for those who tried to destroy you. You didn't have to stoop to their level. On the contrary, you rose so high that they could no longer reach you, and that was the purest victory you could achieve. For a long time, what you saw outside was immobility. It seemed like nothing was happening, that the days passed without any progress, as if time were only pushing you further away from your dreams. People looked and concluded that you had been left behind, that your chance had expired. But while the world was distracted by hasty conclusions, a meticulous, invisible work was being done within you. It was a kind of preparation that could not be rushed, a deep alignment of mind, heart, and spirit that required patience and silence. This waiting was not abandonment, it was investment. The roots of an oak tree do not form in days, and the solidity you were building could not be born in haste. Delay was the perfect disguise for your growth. While others rushed to show results to prove they were alive, you chose the opposite. You used the time to strengthen the invisible muscles of discipline, clarity, and emotional resilience. You allowed your priorities to reorganize, your wounds to heal legitimately, and your eyes to see beyond the immediate, because deep down you understood something few understand. A gift delivered before its due date can become a curse. So instead of begging for open doors, you prepared the ground so that when they did open, you could bear the weight of what was to come. And when, finally, the pieces began to fall into place, everything happened with a smoothness that seemed magical. There was no frantic rush, no desperate struggle, just a perfect fit, as if the entire universe had been waiting for that moment with you. Those who had decreed your end were left with no plausible explanation for what they saw happening. You weren't late. You arrived at exactly the right moment. Delay was just another name for your preparation. Most people, when experiencing intense pain, feel the need to display it, as if validation from others could ease the burden. But you chose the more difficult path, suffering in silence, without turning your pain into social currency. There were no dramatic, indirect posts or seeking sympathy. Yes, there were long nights, hidden tears and internal battles that no one but you witnessed. This isolation was not a sign of weakness, but of unshakable strength. After all, there is a kind of power that arises only when you decide to carry your own weight, without transferring it to the world as a spectacle. While others spent energy narrating their wounds, you channeled your energy into understanding your own scars. You weren't content with the superficial healing. You delved deep to discover where the patterns that hurt you came from, what triggers needed to be deactivated, what lessons lay hidden in the deepest cuts. This choice transformed your suffering from a dark period into a school, a laboratory where you reinvented yourself from scratch. And when you emerged, it wasn't with the expression of someone carrying fresh trauma, but with the calm radiance of someone who transformed pain into wisdom. This confounded those who awaited your final downfall. They expected to find rubble, but instead found a solid structure, made of the very material they tried to use to destroy you. Suffering in silence was your revolution. They expected your response to be immediate and loud. They wanted to see you in despair, begging for justice, or impulsively trying to expose the truth. But you knew a kind of revenge few master, the kind carried out without raising your voice, without moving a single piece to attack, simply letting time and growth take care of revealing everything. Your choice was strategic, not because you lacked the courage to react, but because you were clear that your greatest victory would be to move forward, free of any residue of bitterness. While they spread distorted versions, you strengthened your foundation. Your energy wasn't directed toward denying or confronting, but toward building something that not even the most elaborate rumor could topple. And the truth is, there's no stronger defense than a life that screams integrity, even without words. With each silent step you took toward your elevation, they lost control of the narrative they'd created. It was like watching a fortress rise before your very eyes, knowing they couldn't stop it. When finally your growth became impossible to ignore, there was no longer any room for doubt. Your elevation showed everyone who you truly were, and best of all, without you having to use a single weapon other than your own evolution. This was your revenge, not to destroy anyone, but to transform yourself into something so great that attempts to demean you became irrelevant. To outsiders, your choices made no sense. You let seemingly valuable opportunities slip by, declined invitations everyone would have accepted, remained silent when logic dictated shouting. And inevitably, some interpreted these actions as signs of fear, pride, or even incompetence. But you knew you weren't following the world's logic. You were following instructions from a much higher place, where results are measured not by haste, but by precision. The strategy was invisible to those who only understand quick wins. As you distanced yourself from certain circles and reduced your exposure, judgments came like storms, but you were protected by the understanding that not every move needs to be seen to be powerful. You knew there was sacred timing at work, and that breaking that rhythm to please external expectations would mean compromising the entire structure. Looking back today, it's clear that every retreat was actually an invisible advance. What seemed like madness became a testament to vision. What seemed like closed doors were actually walls being erected to protect what was growing, and those who mocked your strategy now wonder how you managed to get where you are. But you don't need to explain. Life itself has already proven you right. They played the cards they knew: manipulation, rumors, subtle provocations. They trusted that sooner or later you would fall into their traps, that your impulsive reaction would reveal exactly what they wanted. But they didn't count on the scope of your vision. You didn't need to wait for concrete evidence to identify intentions. You just needed to feel the vibration, observe the gestures, grasp the unspoken. Your discernment wasn't the result of luck, but of an attention trained by past pain. To every attempt at manipulation, you responded with a silent retreat. To every invitation disguised as a trap, you responded with absence. And this left them disoriented, because there was no counterattack to anticipate, no argument to counter. Only a strategic void, forcing them to deal with their own frustration. You weren't just avoiding conflict. You were saving energy for what really mattered, and in the end, this discernment became the greatest factor in your victory, because while they wasted their breath trying to create distractions, you remained steadfast in your path. When they finally realized they couldn't manipulate you, it was too late. You were unreachable, unleasable, and above all, unshakable. There was a time when life thrust you into the eye of such violent storms that any outsider would have sworn it would be your end. The losses piled up, betrayals came from where you least expected, and even your own mind seemed to conspire against you. It wasn't just a physical or emotional test, it was a profound spiritual one, where every fiber of your being was tested. But instead of reducing you to dust, this fire began to shape you differently. It didn't just burn the surface, it burned away the excess, what no longer served, what had no true roots. And in the end, what remained wasn't fragility, it was armor. This process didn't happen overnight. At first, the pain was almost unbearable. Each day was a silent battle to keep your body upright and your mind at least a little lucid. But as you resisted, something invisible happened. Your tolerance for chaos increased, your reading of situations became more accurate, and your emotions went from being an open field to well-guarded fortresses. The fire didn't just test you, it reprogrammed you. Where there was once reactivity, calm was born. Where there was once dependence, self-sufficiency was born. Today, when the storms blow again, they no longer have the same effect. Not because life has become easier, but because you have become stronger. The same provocations that once would have knocked you off balance now barely touch you. Those who still try to hurt you are fighting an old version that no longer exists. You're not just resilient, you're unbreakable. The fire didn't destroy you, it crowned you. Few things are as devastating as public humiliation. Those moments when they expose you, distort your story, and try to reduce everything you are to a single mistake or a narrative that suits them. You've known that place, and it wasn't easy to navigate. The pain wasn't just the injustice, but the feeling of powerlessness, the loss of control over your own image. And yet, even on that cold ground, you found something precious, the opportunity to shed the masks, to abandon the burden of pleasing others, and to redefine what truly mattered. Instead of allowing humiliation to turn into resentment, you transformed it into discipline. You used shame as a brick, rejection as cement, and silence as mortar to build something solid. While others engaged in wars to clear their names, you were busy rebuilding your own essence, and this reconstruction was so profound that when you returned to the scene, there was nothing left to prove. What spoke for you was your own transformation. What began as an attack, meant to destroy you, ended up serving as the foundation for something unshakable. The humiliation stripped you of any need for approval, and in doing so, gave you the freedom to act without fear. This was the true beginning of your reign, not for the crown, but for the realization that nothing external could define you anymore. While most people spend years trying to fit into spaces, begging for opportunities, and knocking on doors that never open, you chose the opposite path. You became the key. This didn't happen by chance, but because you understood that forcing access to places you're not yet ready for is a form of self-sabotage. So instead of seeking entry, you sought evolution. You did the inner work, refined your vision, strengthened your boundaries, and cleared your energy of all that wasn't aligned. This silent preparation began to alter your presence. Without you realizing it, you were no longer someone trying to introduce yourself. You were someone the environment itself recognized and wanted to attract. Doors, previously closed, began to open on their own, not because you knocked on them, but because your energy now vibrated at the same frequency as what was behind them. And that's something you can't buy, imitate, or fake. The result is that you no longer settle for just any invitation. Your sense of worth is so strong that you often decide whether to enter or not. Becoming the key is liberating because it means access no longer depends on others' permission. It depends solely on who you are and how true you remain to your essence. There comes a time when you realize that crowd approval is volatile and that relying on it is like building on quicksand. You've reached this point and made a radical choice: to trade applause for authority. This authority isn't the kind that comes from positions or titles, but the kind that comes from living in alignment with your truth, even if it means being misunderstood or underestimated. It's silent, but irresistible. It doesn't need marketing to exist. It's felt. To achieve this position, you had to give up certain things that previously seemed vital. You had to accept being temporarily forgotten, abandon the obsession with immediate relevance, and endure the loneliness that comes with integrity. But in doing so, you gain something no one can take away: an inner stability that depends not on those who assist you, but on those who send you. Today, your worth isn't measured by the number of applause you receive, but by the real impact you have, even when no one is looking. That's the difference between being famous and being respected. You chose the latter path, and it, though longer, is eternal. For many, surrender is synonymous with giving up. But you discovered that in the game of life, there are times when letting go of control is the most powerful move you can make. Your surrender wasn't apathy, it was trust. Trust that you didn't need to manipulate every detail, that the right things would find their way to you when you were ready. This took more courage than fighting against everything, because it meant admitting that you wouldn't always be in control, but you would still be safe. This stance confused many people. They thought you had lost your strength, that you were complacent. Little did they know that behind the scenes you were aligning every part of your being, preparing for a leap that would only be possible when all the elements were in place. It wasn't inertia, it was strategy. You weren't standing still, you were positioned, and when the moment arrived, the tide turned so naturally it seemed inevitable. There was no rush, no desperate struggle, just the realization that by letting go of the helm, you had allowed the current to carry you exactly where you were always meant to be. Your surrender didn't weaken you, it put you in command in a way that effort never could have.